It's that time of year again when overly zealous Christians like to troll atheists about celebrating the Christmas holiday, and atheist edgelords post memes about Christmas being pagan in origin. Now, is any of it true? Can atheists celebrate Christmas without being hypocrites? Is Christmas really a pagan holiday? I'm going to tackle the easy question first. Yes, atheists can celebrate Christmas even though we believe there is no God, and then as a consequence, Jesus is not the Son of God. I put up a tree and lights outside my house last weekend. Stuff is hanging in my hallways. The kids are excited. We even have an advent calendar thing for each of my girls to open something each morning in December. Advent is nothing more than countdown to Christmas for us. Both girls have no idea about anything religious. Am I being hypocritical? No, I don't think so, because Christmas, in its modern incarnation, has become just like Halloween. No one, not even the Christians, believe that one must make soul cakes to distribute out to the poor so as to improve their chances of getting into heaven, or that people similarly must leave out food for the dead. In fact, the old practice that trick or treat likely evolved from, a close knit community would pretend to not know who the guests were requesting said charity food, and so they'd wear geyser masks to hide people's identity. That's all a very, very far cry from what we now think of as traditional Halloween costumes and trick or treating. These days, it's just a fun holiday that has no real spiritual dimension, let alone a Christian one. In fact, almost the opposite. But it's celebrated by Christians, atheists, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, and basically anyone in America and a variety of other countries. And why is it celebrated? Because it's fun. There's no reason for the season in October, even though, like Christmas, Halloween has taken over its entire month. That's exactly what Christmas is for atheist families like my own. It's just a fun tradition that we take the parts we like and discard the religious bits we don't believe in. You're not going to find a manger or a nativity at my house, or at least I'm a little bit tempted to put up the stock all-white nativity cutout that looks like two T-Rexes fighting over a table saw, because that's hilarious. Besides that, though, my kids get excited. We put up a tree, we have lights, we make gingerbread houses, we get presents, we have pictures taken, we have a big meal with family, but my kids don't even know the Jesus story. The same thing for Easter, really, except then it's about hiding eggs around the house or in the yard and the Easter bunny bringing chocolate. This concept is not hard for Christians to understand. In fact, they've let us know they already do. Have you ever noticed those signs or bumper stickers that say, "Keep Christ in Christmas"? Well, that's referring to Christian backlash of exactly the scenario I'm describing. Non-religious traditions are overwhelming the religious aspects of the holiday in the wider culture, to such an extreme degree that religious Christians are trying to build a movement to reassert the religious aspects. What I'm discussing is exactly what these Christians oppose. We're taking the fun non-religious aspects dominating our culture and leaving behind the religious ones. Christmas in a post-Christian society will be much like Halloween already is. Now, you'll notice this is a defensive argument, providing an explanation of how non-Christians can enjoy a holiday like Christmas without being hypocritical. Unfortunately, I think this defensive posture is taken too far by some popular atheists, where they go against the historical evidence to try and claim that all of these fun, non-religious aspects of Christmas are pagan in origin. In fact, I had shared some of the same sort of memes and ideas on Twitter and was corrected by Michael Jones of Inspiring Philosophy, as well as Tim O'Neill, who writes History for Atheists blog. Tim is actually an atheist activist from Australia. I largely want to give both of these guys credit for pointing me towards the resources linked below in the comments, and I want to put out a video to disseminate these ideas because I believe they're true. The problem is that there just aren't any good early sources for a lot of the pagan appropriation claims. An important aspect here is to draw a distinction between something being biblical or religious in nature, or a tradition that came up as part of a religious celebration that was then added to the holiday. Certainly, early church fathers that mentioned Christmas, like Clement or Hippolytus, would be baffled at the idea of a fat bearded man in a red suit, a decorated evergreen tree, or the exchange of presents being so closely associated with the birth of Christ. There's nothing holy about our modern Christian traditions because we know what actual Christian holy practices derived from the Bible look like. Things like consuming bread and wine in communion, or the baptism of a person with water, or holy sacraments derived specifically from Christian practices recorded in the Bible. As we will see, the development of our modern cherished traditions are far removed from anything religious. But that doesn't mean that they're pagan in origin either. The real story is far more complicated and a lot messier. First, let's talk about the dating of Christmas on December 25th. Andrew Mark Henry has a PhD in ancient Christianity and has written a lot of good information on this, as well as produced a video on the topic that I'll link in the comments. Effectively, there were motivations to get to December 25th because on the ancient Julian calendar, that's when they thought the winter solstice occurred. The ancient systems had a lot of errors. So basically, there was motivation to put the birth of Jesus on a day of cosmic significance. Effectively, the theory is that by the 3rd century, Christians believed that people with perfect lives, i.e. saints or people like Jesus, died on the same day they were conceived. That's obviously false, but it's supposedly what they believed. They calculated Jesus to have died on March 25th, which would have been assumed to be the day of his conception. And if you fast forward 9 months, you get to December 25th. Now, was this motivated reasoning? Probably. Was it possibly there to coincide with the Roman festival of Saturnalia? Possibly, but there's no direct evidence of that. In fact, Saturnalia is supposedly where Christmas is supposed to have stolen the idea of presents from, as well as using evergreen tree limbs as decorations for the feast. The problem with this is that our earliest sources describing Saturnalia celebrations don't mention anything about evergreen decorations. And while they did exchange presents at Saturnalia, the practice died out along with the holiday. Gift exchanges were associated with St. Nicholas, a 4th century bishop and gift giver, but the celebration of that wasn't widespread in Christian countries, and then when it was, it happened early in December on St. Nicholas Day on December 6th, or around New Year's Eve. It was only in the 1800s when stories and poems like A Christmas Carol or The Night Before Christmas that the practice got moved to Christmas Eve. In fact, if one wants to tie Christmas to Saturnalia, one could point to the fact that for most of the time after Jesus' life, Christmas was a raucous, often drunk affair with social norms being upended and slaves sitting at the main table being served by their masters, basically things that also happened at Saturnalia. The problem with this is that these sorts of festivals were actually common in winter during socially stratified societies, so any link there would be tenuous at best. There's no way to prove it. Some things do just get lost to history. However, it is a fact that for well over 1,000 years of its life, Christmas was a Mardi Gras-like affair that took place over a period in December. It was tamed and transformed to be the family-friendly event that we know and love today by elites in the 1800s, which is where we get Santa Claus, presents, and the Christmas tree from. The Christmas tree first became a thing in Germany and became popularized in the West by English Queen Victoria and her husband, Prince Albert, who was born in Germany. There are legends that Martin Luther originated the German practice of decorating an evergreen tree at Christmas, but this itself lacks evidence and is likely a legend of tying a popular custom to an important religious icon. However, once Victoria and Albert popularized decorating the Christmas tree, it was picked up by the middle class and nobility in England and then spread from there. My key point is that the Christmas tree didn't really become something associated so tightly with Christmas until well over 1,500 years of Christmas celebrations, far removed from anything of actual Christian religious significance. However, this doesn't mean it came from pagan practices or customs either. It can literally just be a good idea someone had that became popular and spread across cultures. People don't need much reason to copy good ideas. Even Jewish Americans have started having Hanukkah bushes that resemble Christmas trees, because decorating an evergreen with lights and ornaments is fun. Another thing to consider is time. We need more than vague links between similar sounding events. I've got news for you, but in the ancient world, if you wanted to decorate in winter, using evergreens is likely to be a popular method because that's the only tree that's alive in winter. So let's say there were evergreens decorated at Saturnalia in the Roman Empire or in ancient Egypt for some festival in December. So what? Those practices had died out by the time we can literally trace back the Christmas tree to becoming an actual cultural phenomenon during Christmas. It simply doesn't make sense to say that some Germans in the 1700s had stolen the idea from a pagan ritual celebrated in the 3rd century in Egypt. Conversely, Christians shouldn't prescribe religious significance to these ancillary, non-religious traditions that became part of what was originally a religious observance, especially if those non-religious traditions have since outgrown the religious observance in popularity. If an atheist is putting up a tree, lights, taking their kids to see Santa at a mall, and exchanging presents on December 25th, it's hard to say that Jesus is the reason for celebrating just because these non religious traditions were at one time done in concurrence with a religious celebration. I don't think most Christians would want to follow that kind of logic everywhere it leads. Consider Mardi Gras in New Orleans, which is the feast of eating fatty or rich foods on the Tuesday before Ash Wednesday, and the Lenten tradition of fasting begins, all of which are Catholic holy days and religious practices. If you're not aware, even as far back as the 1800s, Mardi Gras was a drunken party in a part of the city where there's also a tradition of young women exposing their breasts for men who give them beaded necklaces or some other trinket. This is as much a non-religious tradition that is now attached to a celebration related to a religious observance from Christianity, as much as the Christmas tree and presents are attached to Christmas. Do Christians really want to say that Jesus is the reason for shaking them titties at Mardi Gras? I don't think so. This leads to my overall point. No one must feel bad about celebrating these different traditions. Not fundamentalist Christians who are afraid of doing something pagan in origin, nor atheists who don't believe Jesus was the Son of God. At the end of the day, there are all sorts of weird but fun traditions we've inherited in our popular culture that we can keep or stop doing as we see fit for the simple fact that we enjoy doing them. The significance of each tradition is unique to each individual and can take on either a secular or religious meaning depending upon your point of view, which itself can change. I'm an apostate. I worked heavily in a small church for nearly a decade, and Christmas was easily our busiest time of year, with me spending hours on end working AV and sound for all sorts of services and rehearsals. I sacrificed a lot of my time to make those things happen, and I thought I was doing it in the service of an all-important divine being. I still enjoyed presents, putting up the tree, exchanging gifts, and spending time with friends and family, even then, but I tried to make Christmas Christ-focused. Now, I obviously don't work in a church, and I still enjoy all those non-religious aspects I just mentioned, and I cherish my memories of doing these things with my kids now that I'm a parent. At the end of the day, can't we all just calm down and enjoy the holidays for whatever meaning we derive out of them?